Park Ji-soo said it loud enough for the whole floor to hear. You are blocking the Vandermeer display. Move.
Move!
Celeste Monroe did not move immediately. Not from defiance, just because she was finishing a note for a client who had asked her to remember which earrings her daughter had been admiring. She finished the note. She folded it. Then she looked up at Jisoo, and Jisoo looked back at her with the expression of a woman who had decided years ago that certain people were decorative problems, and Celeste Monroe was one of them. Celeste moved. She went back to her corner of the floor, the corner that Jisoo had assigned her on her first day and had never once suggested she leave, and stood there in her uniform, hands at her sides, face giving nothing away. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hansel Maison, Cheongdam-dong moved through its Tuesday afternoon. Inside, the boutique hummed with the carefully manufactured tranquility of a place that considered itself better than most of the people who entered it. Celeste had been working here for 6 months. She knew every piece in every case. She could describe the sourcing of every stone, the weight of every setting, the name of every designer behind every collection. She knew which clients liked to be approached immediately and which needed 10 minutes to breathe before anyone spoke to them. She knew the Vandermeer display better than the woman who was telling her to move away from it. None of this mattered to Jisoo. It had never mattered to Jisoo. What mattered to Jisoo was that Celeste was 28 years old and black and from Memphis and breathtakingly beautiful in a way that Jisoo found personally offensive. Not because of the beauty itself, but because of what the beauty refused to do, which was apologize. Celeste Monroe walked into that boutique every morning in her uniform, and she was stunning, and she knew it, and she wore it the same way she wore her name, without announcement, without performance, just as a fact about herself that she had long since stopped managing for other people's comfort. Jisoo had been trying to make her apologize for it for 6 months. She moved her station. She gave her clients away before Celeste could get to them. She assigned her cleaning duties that were not in her job description. She laughed at things Celeste said in the morning briefings. Not at the content, but at the act of Celeste speaking. Laughing in the way people laugh when they have decided that a person's voice itself is a kind of presumption. And every morning Celeste came back. And every morning she was exactly who she was. It was the most infuriating thing Jisoo had ever witnessed. That Tuesday afternoon was going to be the last one. Jisoo had already decided. She just needed a reason she could say out loud. The woman who would give her that reason arrived at 20 minutes past 2. Before we get into what happened next, and you need to know what happened next, I have a quick question. Where in the world are you watching this right now? What time is it there? Drop it in the comments because I love knowing how far these stories reach. And if you are not subscribed yet, please subscribe right now and hit that like button. It is 1 second of your time, and it means everything. Okay, back to the boutique. The woman who walked in was old. She was Korean, 70-something, and she was wearing a plain gray coat that had seen better decades and shoes that were practical rather than anything else. Her hair was silver, and her face was warm, and she walked into Hansel Maison at 20 past 2 on a Tuesday, the way people walk into places they have every right to enter, which is to say she just walked in. The door associate let her through. Technically, the policy required it, but the look he gave the floor told everyone what he thought. Jisoo clocked her from across the room and turned away. That was a whole language. That turn. Senior associate stiffened and found reasons to be occupied. The old woman drifted toward the cases on the east wall, and nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The boutique simply waited, collectively, professionally, for her to finish whatever looking she had come to do and leave. Celeste watched all of this from her corner. Then she walked across the floor. She didn't make it a thing. She didn't look around to see if anyone was watching, didn't square her shoulders, didn't perform. She just walked across the floor to where the old woman was standing and said, in Korean, that still carried Memphis underneath every syllable, "Welcome, ma'am. The Rio collection came in this morning. Would you like to see it?" The old woman looked at her. Her eyes were very dark and very clear, and she looked at Celeste the way people look when they are actually seeing someone rather than just looking at them. "I would," she said. They spent 40 minutes together. Celeste pulled pieces from the cases and laid them on the velvet trays and talked about them the way she talked about everything she loved, directly, without overselling, letting the things speak and just providing context. The old woman asked questions that surprised her. Good questions. Questions about craft, provenance, and design philosophy. Questions that showed she understood more than she was presenting. Celeste adjusted, stopped explaining, and started conversing. The old woman smiled at the adjustment. She noticed everything. At the end of it, the old woman said she would like to buy 8 pieces. Then she said she didn't have her card on her. She had come straight from her grandson's office and left her bag there. Her grandson could arrange payment. She gave Celeste a name. Celeste didn't recognize it. She took the paper and went to Jisoo. Jisoo read the name. She read it twice. Then she looked up at Celeste with the expression of someone who has just found exactly what they were looking for. She has no money, Jisoo said. She's given me a contact name. She came in here with no card, no cash, and some name written on a piece of paper, and you spent 40 minutes with her. Jisoo's voice was rising now, not losing control, but choosing to let the whole floor hear. Do you know what that woman is? She is a time waster. She is an embarrassment. And you brought her here and sat with her and put our pieces on the velvet trays for her like she was a real client. She stepped closer. You want to know what you are, Celeste? You are the reason we have a dress code. You are exactly the kind of person who would think that woman belongs here. The floor was silent. Senior associates were very busy, not looking over. 2 clients near the Vandermeer display had gone still. Celeste said nothing. Her jaw was tight. That was all. Clean out your station, Jisoo said. You're done. She said it in front of everyone. She said it the way someone says something they've been saving, with satisfaction, with finality, with the small private pleasure of a cruelty finally permitted. Celeste stood there for 3 seconds. Then she nodded once and went to her station. She was not going to cry in this building. She had decided that 6 months ago, she took her things, her notepad, her client notes, the small photograph of her mother she kept tucked behind the register, a lip balm, a pen. She put them in her bag. She looked at the corner of the floor she had occupied for 6 months, which had never once been big enough for her, but which she had made work anyway. And then she turned and walked to where the old woman was still standing beside the Rio collection. I'm so sorry, ma'am, Celeste said quietly. I won't be completing your purchase. Someone else will help you. She paused. The pieces you kept returning to have orange tags. I think they're the right ones. The old woman looked at her. Then she reached out and took Celeste's hand in both of hers. Her hands were warm. God bless you, my child. Good things, she said, very quietly. Come to people who deserve them. Celeste pressed her hand back. Then she walked out, into the Cheongdam-dong afternoon, into Seoul, into the strange open air of a person who has just lost something they needed and is trying to figure out what comes next, and is not going to do it on that pavement in front of that boutique. She was 2 blocks away before she stopped walking. She put her bag down on a bench and sat beside it and looked at a piece of soul that was going about its business without caring about her situation at all, which was somehow comforting. Her phone buzzed. Dara, from Memphis, who had followed her to Seoul and was currently in a music studio in Hongdae, pretending to care about anything other than what Celeste was doing. How was your day? Celeste typed back. I got fired. 3 seconds. I'll bring food. Inside the boutique she had just left, the old woman was standing very still beside the Rio collection. She looked at Jisoo. Jisoo, who had already moved on, who was straightening a display that didn't need straightening because victory made her restless, felt the look and glanced up. The old woman said, that girl was the only person in this room worth anything. Jisoo blinked. And you just fired her for being kind. The old woman reached into her coat pocket. She took out her phone. A very good phone. Celeste would have recognized the model and made a call. 2 rings. Someone answered. She said, in Korean, 4 sentences. Then she ended the call, put the phone away, and looked at Jisoo one more time. Enjoy your afternoon, she said pleasantly, and she walked out. Jisoo stood beside the display she'd been straightening and felt, for reasons she couldn't immediately name, like she had missed something. Something important, something that had walked through that door, and she had not recognized it, and now it was gone. She shook it off. She turned back to the floor. Everything was exactly as it should be. She had no idea. Han Woo-jin was in the middle of a presentation about 4th quarter projections when his phone lit up with his grandmother's name. He picked it up without looking at the room because there were people he interrupted meetings for, and his grandmother was the only one. Halmoni. She spoke for 3 minutes. He listened. His face, which was already a difficult face to read, sharp and still, the kind of face that made people in boardrooms careful, became even less readable. But his assistant Kang Min, who had worked beside him for 4 years, was watching his hands. His hands had stopped moving. Kang Min noted this. When she finished, Woo Jin said, "Thank you for telling me." He ended the call. He set the phone down. He looked at the presentation on the screen, the 4th quarter, the numbers, the projections. And then he looked at Kang Min. "The Cheongdam Boutique," he said. A sales associate named Celeste Monroe was fired today. Find her. Don't tell her why. Kang Min left the room. The presentation continued. Wu Jin watched the numbers on the screen and thought about what his grandmother had said, which was not complicated and was not long, but which had the particular weight of something said by a woman who did not exaggerate and did not speculate and had been watching people for 74 years and was rarely, if ever, wrong about them. She spent 40 minutes with me, Wu Jin. She talked about the pieces like she loved them, like she genuinely loved them, and when they fired her, she came and found me first, to make sure I had what I needed. She was the one who'd been fired, and she came to check on me. He thought about the boutique. He had built Hanso Maison to be the definitive luxury jewelry destination in Seoul. He had spent money and time and years on its aesthetic, its inventory, its positioning. He had not, apparently, spent enough time on who was actually running the floor and what they were doing with the people who walked through the door. He thought about his grandmother walking in alone in her gray coat and nobody moving, and one person, the one they fired, walking across the floor anyway. He thought, that is exactly the kind of person I have been looking for. The kind that does the right thing when there's nothing in it for them. The kind that is not performing. He did not, at that point, know anything about Celeste Monroe beyond her name. He did not know she was from Memphis, or that her mother played jazz, or that she had been filling sketchbooks with jewelry designs since she was a teenager. He did not know she was the most beautiful woman he had been in the same room with in 3 years, because he had not yet been in the same room with her. All of that was coming. Kang Min found Celeste at a cafe 2 streets from the boutique. She was sitting with her bag between her feet and a sketchbook open on the table, drawing something, and she looked up when Kang Min introduced himself with the expression of someone who has had enough surprises for one afternoon and is not sure she has capacity for another. She called Dara from the bathroom. Han Seo Group, Dara said. Celeste, that is the company that owns the boutique that fired you. I know. So, their chairman wants to meet you? That's what his assistant said. Silence. Then, okay, you have to go. I'm not looking for sympathy. Girl, it is not sympathy. Go. And wear the navy. Celeste looked at herself in the cafe bathroom mirror. She was still in her uniform, the boutique uniform she was no longer employed to wear. She looked at it for a moment. Then she thought, no, she was not meeting anybody in that. She called Dara back. Can you bring me the navy? Dara arrived in 11 minutes with the dress and a sandwich and the energy of someone who had been waiting for this exact phone call. You look incredible, Dara said, watching her change. Don't do that. I'm not doing anything. I'm just noting that you look incredible and that the universe works in very interesting ways. She handed her the sandwich. Eat, and don't let them be weird to you. Han Seo Group's headquarters in Gangnam was the kind of building that said everything it needed to say before you got to the front door. Celeste had walked past it before without ever thinking she'd walk through it. She walked through it now with the sandwich still sitting uneasily in her stomach and her chin level. Han Woo Jin was already standing when she came in. That surprised her. She'd expected a desk, a person behind it, the deliberate power staging of someone who wanted her to cross the full length of a room toward them while they sat. Instead, he was by the window, and he turned when the door opened, and she had approximately 2 seconds to register that he was, and there was no other word for it, extraordinary looking, before she put that information somewhere useful and focused on the meeting. He said, I want to apologize for what happened today. She said, your company fired me. Yes, that's what I'm apologizing for. Apologies are nice, she said. They don't pay my rent. His mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. No, he said, they don't. He gestured toward the chairs. Sit down. Please? They sat. He told her what his grandmother had told him. He was direct about it. No preamble, no softening. His grandmother had been visiting the group's retail locations for 3 months, unannounced, to observe how staff treated customers who didn't appear wealthy. Celeste was not the first person she'd watched be humiliated in one of his boutiques. She was the first person she'd watched respond to it the way Celeste had. By crossing the floor anyway. By going back to find his grandmother before she left. By checking on her when she was the one being hurt. I would like to offer you a position, he said. Doing what? Celeste said. He paused. What were you doing at the cafe when my assistant found you? She looked at him. Drawing. What were you drawing? She reached into her bag. She pulled out the sketchbook and put it on the table. Not because she felt like she had to. She did it because something about the way he asked the question made her think he actually wanted to know. He opened it. He turned the first page, the second. He slowed down on the third and didn't speed up again. Celeste watched him work through it and kept her face neutral and her breathing even. She had never shown this to anyone in Seoul. She wasn't sure why she was showing it now. She told herself it was because he'd asked, which was true, and not because something about him made her want to, which was also true, and more complicated. He closed the sketchbook. He looked at her. "You've been designing since when?" "Since I was about 16. And you were working as a junior sales associate?" "Yes." "Did anyone at the boutique know about this?" "Nobody asked." He sat back. He looked at her in a way that Celeste could feel, not uncomfortably, just completely, like she was something he was genuinely trying to understand. Most people looked at her and saw the surface and considered themselves done. He looked like he was still going. "I have a position in the design development team," he said. "It's entry level. That is not a comment on your ability. It's where everyone starts, and the team is good. And if your work is what this sketchbook says it is, you won't stay entry level long." He paused. "My grandmother would also like to properly meet you. She's at the house tonight. I'd like you to come." Celeste looked at him. "Dinner?" "Yes. With your family?" "With my grandmother and me." She considered this, not performing consideration, actually thinking about it, which was a thing he was already noticing about her, the way her thinking happened visibly behind her eyes, rather than in the careful management of her expression. "Okay," she said. He had her card made that afternoon. Celeste Monroe, Hanso Design Development. She held it in the elevator on the way down and thought, well, Memphis to Seoul to this. Her mother would have laughed, the good kind of laugh, the kind that meant, of course, baby, of course. The house in Hanamdong was large and warm and full of the particular atmosphere that comes when someone with real taste has cared for a space for many years. Madame Han met her at the door. "Come in, dear," she said. Come in, come in. I've been thinking about you since I left that boutique." They had dinner at a round table, just the three of them, which Celeste had prepared herself for, which is why she was not prepared for what happened 8 minutes in when the door opened, and a woman walked through it who had definitely not been expected, and definitely knew it and did not care. Yoon Sarah was 33 and Korean and beautiful in a way that announced itself and expected to be received as significant. She had the ease of someone who had decided, somewhere around 25, that ease was something she deserved, and had been performing it so long it had almost become real. She came in from whatever she'd been doing that evening, and stopped in the dining room doorway, and looked at the table, and absorbed the arrangement in under a second. Her eyes went to Celeste. They stayed there exactly long enough to be impolite, which Celeste understood was the point, and then they went to Woojin. "I didn't know you had company," she said warmly. The warmth was technically impeccable. "Celeste," Woojin said, "this is Yoon Sarah. She's the director of brand partnerships." "Oh, more than that, I hope," Sarah said, with a laugh that was light and careless, and aimed precisely at Celeste like a pin. Celeste said, "Nice to meet you." She meant it as nothing. She said it to be polite, but she was watching. She was always watching. She'd learned to watch in 6 months of being watched at that boutique. And what she saw in Sarah's face when she said it was something she filed away and didn't take out again until later, when it mattered. Madame Han, who had been observing all of this from her chair with her soup spoon raised and a placid expression, said, "Sarah, have you eaten? There's enough." "I'm fine," Sarah said. "I just wanted to stop by." She looked at Celeste one more time. "Enjoy your evening." And then she left, which was also a language, the exit as deliberate as the entrance. When her footsteps faded, Madame Han set her spoon down and looked at her grandson. "She knows," she said simply. "Wu Jing, how many? I'm 82. I'll say what I observe. You're 74. I'm saying what I observe." She picked up her spoon again. "Celeste, dear, try the jjigae. I made it myself. My grandson cannot cook to save his life, which is something I have failed at correcting." Celeste tried the jjigae. It was extraordinary. She said so honestly, which made Madame Han point at Wu Jin with her spoon and say, "She's genuine. Look at that. She's just genuine." Wu Jin looked at Celeste. Celeste looked at her soup, but she was smiling. The design team was not easy. Nothing Jisoo had done to her was subtle, but it was also loud, obvious cruelty, the kind you could see and name. What the design team gave her was the quiet version, the kind that works through omission, meetings where she wasn't copied, conversations that stopped when she approached. The particular silence of people who have decided someone is an outsider and are communicating this through the specific texture of how they handle a room when that person enters it. She knew where it came from. Sarah had been busy. Celeste didn't know the details yet. She would, eventually, but she could feel the shape of it. The rumor wasn't hard to guess at. She'd arrived at the company through the chairman's personal intervention. She'd had dinner at his house. She was a black woman from America working in Korean luxury design, and none of that required imagination to weaponize. People didn't need facts. They needed a story that made sense of something that made them uncomfortable, and Sarah had given them one. Celeste did what she always did. She came in early, she did the work, she did it better than was asked and more quietly than was necessary, and she waited for the work to be louder than the story about her. She filled every brief she was given. She also, on her own time, started developing a concept piece, something she'd been thinking about for weeks. A collar necklace, built around the way Soul Light looked in October. The specific quality of it, the way it made surfaces look like they were lit from inside. She worked on it at her desk because she'd run out of room in her sketchbook, and she'd run out of patience for doing her real work in hiding. 3 weeks into the job, Woo Jin did the quarterly design team walkthrough. Standard, scheduled. Everyone knew he was coming. When he got to her station, he stopped. He looked at the concept piece on her desk. He picked it up and looked at it for, she counted, 11 seconds. Then he said to the design development lead, "Work Celeste into the Rio response team." And the room recalibrated. She felt it, the exact moment when the temperature changed, when people who had been carefully not looking at her started very quickly looking at her. Not warmly, but looking. The lead said, "Of course." Woo Jin set the piece back on her desk. He didn't look at Celeste again. He moved on to the next station. She sat very still for a moment after he left her section. Not because of what he'd said. She knew what the work was. She knew what it was worth. But because someone had picked it up. Someone had actually picked it up and looked at it and said the thing that happened next. She called Dara at lunch. "Oh my God, Dara. He saw the piece. And? He put me on the Rio response team." Silence. Then, "Celeste. I know. Celeste. I know, Dara." What she didn't say, what she wasn't ready to say yet, even to Dara, was the other thing. The thing that was getting harder to file in the professional category, where she had been determinedly keeping it since the first dinner. The dinners had kept happening. Not because he arranged them. Madame Han arranged them, with the cheerful, unrepentant transparency of a woman who had stopped pretending she wasn't matchmaking decades ago. Every week, Woo Jin had dinner with his grandmother, and twice in the first month, Celeste arrived to find herself already expected, her place already set. Madame Han emerging from the kitchen saying, "Oh dear, good. Sit down, it's almost ready," as if the specific coincidence of the timing was entirely accidental. Woo Jin, across the table those evenings, stopped performing the distance he'd been maintaining at the office. Not because he chose to drop it, more like the particular atmosphere of his grandmother's dining room made it impractical. Madame Han asked questions and expected real answers and did not accept fine as a response to anything. And in that environment, performance was simply too expensive. So, they talked. He told her about building the company from the ruin of his father's, not the polished version he gave to journalists, but the real one, the scared version, the years when he was 23 and working 16-hour days and genuinely didn't know if it was going to hold. She told him about Memphis, about her mother's hands on the piano keys, about the drawings she used to sell in high school for lunch money, about the fellowship that brought her to Seoul and the feeling, when it ended, of being unable to leave a city that had decided to keep her. He listened the way almost no one listened, completely, without preparing his next sentence while she talked, following where she went, rather than waiting for her to get to a point he'd already decided mattered. One evening he walked her back to the train station. They'd walked from the house. It wasn't far. Seoul in November was cold and clean. And at the entrance he said, "I'd like to take you to dinner. Just us." She looked at him. "Your grandmother arranges dinners." "I know. This would be me arranging one. Different restaurant, different purpose." She thought about it standing there on the pavement, which was not her performing thinking, but actually thinking. He watched her and didn't rush her, which was something she noticed about him. He never rushed her. He had never once in any conversation pushed past a pause, never filled her silences for her. It was such a simple thing. It mattered more than she could explain. "Okay," she said. He took her to a restaurant in Itaewon that was small and warm and full of the kind of food that required attention. They ate for 3 hours. The conversation went everywhere, from the work to the city, to the things people got wrong about luxury, to a long detour into whether the color of a stone changed its emotional register and what that meant about the relationship between beauty and feeling. which was the kind of conversation Celeste had been having in her head alone for years and was having out loud for the first time with someone who didn't need her to explain what she meant. She got home at midnight. Dara was still up. How was dinner? Celeste set her bag down. She stood in the middle of her apartment and looked at the wall where she'd pinned some of her sketches. It was dinner, she said. Dara, who had known her since they were 11 years old in Memphis, said, "Mm-hmm. Don't." I didn't say anything. I can hear what you didn't say. Celeste, baby, your face right now. Celeste turned around so Dara couldn't see her face, which she then spent a moment arranging into something more neutral. Go to sleep, she said. You like him. Good night, Dara. She liked him. She wasn't going to examine it yet. It was too new and too strange and too potentially complicated to examine yet. But she liked him. Not the chairman of a company, not the extraordinary-looking man who could fill a room without moving, not any of the structural facts of him. Him, the person who didn't rush her pauses and listened with his whole self and had looked at her sketchbook like it was something worth looking at. She went to sleep thinking about October light on soul surfaces. Sarah was thinking about something else entirely. She had watched that dinner happen from a table she had positioned herself at across the restaurant, not close enough to hear, close enough to see. Close enough to see Celeste lean forward over something she'd said and watch Woo Jin's face do the thing she had been waiting 2 years for it to do. But not for her. For someone else. For this woman from Memphis who had shown up in his boutique and his house and now his restaurant and who Sarah had miscalculated as a temporary inconvenience and was now understanding was something else. She left the restaurant before they did. She walked home through the November cold and she thought about what she'd built and what she needed to protect and what she was willing to do to protect it, and by the time she reached her apartment, she had the shape of something in mind. She was going to need to think carefully. The photograph she'd had taken of the restaurant dinner was already being handled. A journalist she'd cultivated over 2 years was asking questions about the chairman's new design hire, about whether professional decisions were being made for professional reasons. That would run. That was already running. But it wasn't going to be enough. She needed something that looked like proof, something that would take Celeste out of the picture completely, and publicly, and permanently. She started making calls. 3 weeks later, Han Myung-ja returned to Seoul. She arrived from Paris with her luggage, and her elegance, and the particular authority of a woman who had rebuilt herself in a foreign city, and returned home exactly as formidable as she'd left. She was 62, and beautiful in a structured way. Cheekbones, posture, the kind of presence that made people straighten up when she entered a room. She loved her son in the complicated way of a woman who had not been present for enough of his growing up and carried that knowledge like something she would not put down. Sarah had called her 3 days before she arrived, had told her things. Not lies, exactly. Sarah was too smart for crude lies. She'd used facts and arranged them. Woo Jin was involved with a member of his staff, an American, very young. It had happened quickly. People were talking. The press was interested. Myung-ja came home. She met Celeste once. In the lobby of headquarters. She had arranged it through Woo Jin's schedule, appearing at a time she knew Celeste would be coming through, and she stood in the lobby and looked at this young woman and conducted a calculation that Celeste could feel without being able to fully read. Myung-ja said, "You work in design development." "Yes, ma'am," Celeste said. "How long have you been in Seoul?" 2.5 years. "And before that?" "Memphis." A pause. "My son speaks well of your work." "That's kind of him." Myung-ja looked at her for another moment. She was not unkind. Celeste could see that. She was afraid, dressed as something colder. "I hope," she said carefully, "that you understand the complexity of your position here." Celeste looked at her steadily. "I understand that I work hard and I'm good at my job," she said. "I think that's the part that matters." Myung-ja said nothing more. She left. That evening, Woo Jin called Celeste and said, "My mother met you today." "She did. What did you think?" "She's protective of you," Celeste said. "That's not a bad thing." A pause. "She's difficult. So is Seoul. I'm still here." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I told her your work is the best in the department." "That's true. I also told her that what I do outside the office is not a board decision." "That's also true." Another pause. "I'm sorry she made you feel." "Woo Jin," Celeste said. "I'm okay. I've been okay before and I'll keep being okay. Stop apologizing for your family's learning curve." He laughed. A real one. Short and surprised. She'd made him laugh before, but always slightly unexpectedly. Like he kept forgetting she might. She liked it every time. Then came the gala. The Hanso Annual Design Gala was the most significant event in Seoul's luxury calendar. This year it mattered more than most because the new collection was premiering. The collection that had grown from the response team work, the collection that had Celeste's concept piece as its centerpiece, the one Woo Jin had picked up from her desk and decided the whole line should speak to. Her name was in the program notes. She had read that 3 times. Sarah had been planning for 3 weeks. The gala was everything it was supposed to be. Packed, beautiful, the particular electricity of an industry watching itself be celebrated. Celeste wore black. She talked to clients and press and international buyers, and she talked about the collection like she knew it, because she had made part of it, and knowing it was not performance. A journalist found her near the East display at 9:30, young, Korean, friendly. She asked about the collection, about the design philosophy, about Celeste's background. Celeste answered. The conversation was easy, wide-ranging, moved from the collection to Seoul to the Hanso brand identity. Nothing in it felt wrong. The journalist had a recording device in her pocket. What the journalist published the following morning, exclusive, Han Seo Design Hire spoke openly about client data at Gala, was built from sentences taken out of context and laid beside confidential client registry information that the journalist had received separately, attributed in the piece to a source within the design department. Celeste's phone started ringing at 11:30 that night. She was asleep. Then she wasn't. She read the article in the dark of her apartment at midnight and felt something drop through her stomach that wasn't quite fear, but was in the same building. She called Dara. I didn't give anyone client data, she said. I don't have access to client registry data. I'm junior design staff. I know, Dara said. Read me the quotes. Celeste read them. Dara was quiet. Those are real things you said, Dara said slowly, but not about client data. No, I told them about the collection, about design philosophy. Someone put them next to information I never had and made it look like it came from me. Another silence. Who has access to that client registry? Celeste thought about it. Senior brand partnerships, she said. Directors and above. A long pause. Celeste, Dara said. I know, Celeste said. They sat on the phone together in the dark and didn't say the name because they didn't have proof yet. But they both knew. At 1:17 in the morning, Woo Jin called. She picked up. I know you didn't do this, he said. No question in it. Not even a half question. Something in her chest loosened, just slightly, just enough to breathe properly. How? Because I know who you are. He said it like it was the simplest fact in the world, which was almost more than she could hold. Tell me everything that happened tonight, from the moment you arrived, which she told him. He listened. The whole thing, every detail, including the journalist, including the conversation, including every sentence she could remember saying, and the ones she couldn't. He asked her 4 questions. Short, precise questions that told her he was already doing something with what she was giving him. Go to sleep, he said. Come to work in the morning. Your name is in the program notes of that collection, and I am not removing it. Woo Jin! I mean it. Sleep. She lay in the dark after he hung up, and looked at the ceiling of her apartment, and thought about a man who had picked up a sketchbook and actually looked at it, who didn't fill her silences, who had called her at 1 in the morning and said, I know who you are, like it was the simplest thing. She was not okay, exactly, but she was something close to it. She went to sleep. Han Woo Jin gave the investigation to his head of security and his legal team at 7 in the morning. He told them 2 things, be thorough and be fast. Every document in the Hanso confidential registry had embedded metadata, invisible, permanent, recording every access, every print, every transmission. The brief that had appeared in the journalist's hands had been accessed 11 days before the gala. The terminal was in the Brand Partnerships Directorate. The user was Yoon Sarah. The audio analysis of the journalist's recording took 4 hours. Legal had it done by noon. Celeste had talked about design philosophy. She had talked about the collection. She had never referenced a single client name, a single data point, a single number. The journalist had been given the client information separately and had arranged the story to imply Celeste was the source, because that was how Sarah had constructed it. The journalist, once legal counsel made contact, understood immediately what she'd been used for and cooperated completely. By 1:30 in the afternoon, the evidence was assembled. Sarah was called to Woo Jin's office at 2 o'clock. She came with the controlled composure of someone who had prepared for this possibility and had decided that composure was the best response. She sat across from him, and she was beautiful and immaculate and absolutely certain she had covered everything. He put the metadata report on the desk. He put the audio analysis beside it. He looked at her. The client brief you accessed 11 days ago, he said. The one on your terminal. The one that appeared in a journalist's hands the night of the gala. Sarah looked at the documents. Something crossed her face. Not panic. Something colder. The specific expression of someone watching a structure they built very carefully come down. I can explain. You accessed confidential client data, he said. You gave it to a journalist. You framed a member of my staff. You engineered a story designed to destroy her reputation and her career. He was very quiet, very still. I need you to tell me why, because I am genuinely trying to understand it. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then she said, she doesn't belong here. He looked at her. She just appeared, Sarah said, and the control in her voice was fraying now, something real coming through. She appeared out of nowhere, and you looked at her like, she stopped. Like what? He said, like I wasn't in the room. The office was completely silent. Wu Jin looked at this woman, who had been beside him for 2 years, and had spent 2 years mistaking proximity for something it was not. He did not feel angry. He felt tired. The deep, particular tiredness of someone who has been deceived not by a stranger but by someone they trusted, even a little. You're terminated, he said. Legal will be in contact about the data breach. I would recommend full cooperation. Sarah stood. She gathered herself. It was almost impressive how quickly the composure reassembled. She's going to break your heart, she said at the door. Girls like that always do. You don't know anything about girls like that, he said. You've never met one. She left. He sat in the office for a while after. Then he made 2 calls. The first was to his head of retail operations. The second was to his mother. He went to the Cheongdam boutique the following morning. Jisoo was on the floor when he arrived. She knew who he was. Of course she did. And she moved toward him with a professional smile and the particular body language of someone who has done nothing wrong and is very sure of it. He asked for the staff to assemble. They came, everyone, corner to corner, the full floor. He said, my grandmother visited this location 7 weeks ago. She was in her 70s, and she was wearing a plain coat, and she came in alone, and nobody spoke to her for 40 minutes. One staff member crossed the floor to help her. That staff member was fired the same day. The floor was very quiet. The woman you fired, he said, is currently a member of my design development team. Her work is the centerpiece of the new collection. Her name is in the program notes of a gala that most of you would not have received invitations to. He looked at Jisoo. You fired her for treating my grandmother like a person. You fired her on the floor, in front of clients, in front of staff, in a way designed to humiliate her. He paused. You're dismissed. Collect your things. Jisoo stared at him. Now, please, he said. She went. And the room watched her go, and nobody said anything, and the boutique absorbed the silence like it had earned it. He stayed for another hour. He walked the floor. He talked to the remaining staff about what the brand standard actually was, not the version Jisoo had been running, the real one. He was calm and direct and thorough, and when he left the boutique, it felt different than it had when he arrived, lighter somehow, like a pressure had been released. That evening he went to Celeste's apartment with takeout from the Korean-American fusion place near the Han River that she'd mentioned once, 4 months ago, that she liked. She opened the door and looked at the food and then at him. How did you know I liked that place? You said it once, in October. We were talking about the color temperature of the new cases, and you mentioned you'd walked past it and it smelled extraordinary, and you'd never gone in. She looked at him for a long moment. You remember things I say? I remember everything you say, he said. You should probably know that. She stepped back. He came in. Her apartment was warm and close, the walls pinned with sketches, the table covered in sketchbooks, new ones, the work of someone who had been opened up, who had found their room and was filling it. He looked at the sketches while she found plates, and he thought about the 11 seconds he'd stood holding her concept piece at her desk. The moment he'd understood that the answer to something he'd been asking himself was already inside his company, at an entry-level station, going unrecognized. They sat on the floor because the table wasn't usable. She'd lit a candle at some point, without making it a thing. The food was good and the conversation was easy, and somewhere around the second hour she said, about something else entirely, I'm not going anywhere, you know. People have been trying to get rid of me since I got here, and I'm still here. He looked at her. I know. I want you to know I know, she said. I'm not fragile about it. I've been not fragile about it for a while. I know that too, he said. It's one of the things. He stopped. She looked at him, waited. It's one of the things, he said, and then stopped again, and she saw him doing something unusual, which was struggling. Not for words. He had words, for the courage to deploy them, and she found, watching him, that this was the thing that finally got to her. Not the dinners or the sketchbook or the restaurant in Itaewon. This, a man who could command a boardroom, who could fire someone with the stillness of a mountain, sitting on her apartment floor unable to finish a sentence about her. Woo Jin, she said. Yes. Say the thing. He looked at her. You are the most honest person I have been in a room with since I started this company, he said. You are the most talented person in my design department. You are... He stopped again. I don't know how to say this without it sounding like a list. Lists are fine, she said. I like lists. I grew up in a house where my mother made lists about music. Which notes went where? She looked at him. Finish the list. You are the first person in 3 years who makes me want to actually be somewhere, he said. Not manage it. Not run it, but be in it, wherever you are. The candle between them burned. Okay, she said. He smiled, and it was the real one. She'd seen glimpses of it before, but never the full version, which turned out to be devastating. That means yes, he said. It always does, she said. 6 months later, the launch of the Worthwhile collection. Celeste collection. Really hers now. Her name in the program, her concept fully realized in 32 pieces that had been reviewed by international buyers and received the kind of coverage that companies spend years trying to manufacture. Madame Han was in the front row. She was wearing the Rio piece Celeste had shown her in the boutique, which had quietly appeared in her jewelry box 2 weeks after that afternoon. She had not asked how it got there. She had put it on and said nothing, which was its own kind of gratitude. Ham Young-ja was 4 seats down. She had called Celeste the week before, not to apologize exactly, which Celeste understood wasn't quite in her vocabulary, but to invite her to lunch, which was adjacent to an apology and good enough. They'd had lunch. They'd talked. Myung-ja had looked at the sketches Celeste had brought, because Celeste had figured out that this woman communicated through judgment of competence, and the sketches were the most direct language she had. Myung-ja had looked at them for a long time. Then she'd said, "These are exceptional." Celeste had said, "Thank you," and the lunch had gotten easier from there. Myung-ja was wearing a piece from the collection tonight. She had chosen it herself. Dara was in the 3rd row in the most dramatic earrings in the entire line, taking photographs, making sounds that were disrupting the people around her and not stopping. At the end of the presentation, Madame Han found Celeste near the window. She took her hands in both of hers. "Good things," she said. "Come to people who deserve them." Celeste looked at this small, precise, extraordinary woman who had walked into a boutique in a plain gray coat and changed everything. "You planned the whole thing," she said. "I planned nothing," Madame Han said, with great dignity. "I went looking. You were what I found. What happened after that was just..." She waved a hand. "The world doing what it does when the right people find each other." Celeste squeezed her hands. "Thank you. Thank yourself," Madame Han said. "You crossed the floor. 1 year later, a boutique in Cheongdam-dong, new management. A woman named Song Hyun who had worked her way up through the design team and ran the floor the way it should have always been run. Every person who walked through that door treated like they were worth something. Because they were. Because that was the brand standard and always had been, regardless of what it had looked like for a while. The window display had Celeste Monroe's name on it. She stood outside on the pavement with Woo Jin beside her and looked at her name in that window and felt something complete itself. Some loop that had opened on a Tuesday afternoon when a floor manager pointed and said, "Move," and she moved and then went back to the corner and held the edge of the counter until her hands stopped shaking. "Okay," he said. "More then," she said. He took her hand. She let him. They stood there on the Cheongdam-dong pavement in the Seoul afternoon, and the city went about its business around them, indifferent and enormous and beautiful. And Celeste Monroe from Memphis, Tennessee, who had crossed a floor for an old woman when there was nothing in it for her, stood in front of her own name in a window and thought, "Yes, this is exactly right. This is exactly what it was always supposed to be." They went inside. The door opened wide. The boutique received them the way all spaces should receive the people who come through their doors, as if their presence was the whole point, because it was. And if you made it all the way here, drop a comment right now. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the firing? The sketchbook? The call at 1 in the morning? I need to know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, Do it right now before you click away, because the next story is already coming, and it is worth being here for. Every single time.